Welcome back to another Relatively Damaged Live. My name is Angela, and this is.
Cat.
The live shows are currently streamed to YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, I think Twitter, somewhere else maybe too. Remember if to follow and subscribe, and if you like the show, to share it with your friends. Kat and I usually meet on Mondays and talk for about 30 minutes on topics we find interesting. So, for today's topic, we are ignorant white women discussing Juneteenth and equality. Um, and Kat's got a quote, and we're just gonna go with this. I want to personally say I am owning my ignorance.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute because it's just got to have some very interesting concepts on that. Why are we ignorant? But this is the uh, General Order Number 3, which was issued by General Gordon Granger of the U.S. Army when he arrived on Galveston Island on June 19th. And it was to inform the formerly enslaved inhabitants of Texas that they were free. So it says, the people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. So
Yeah, so
that's
I
what the
just want
order
to.
reads.
Yeah, but I think when we were briefly talking about this earlier, at least for me, right? I felt like when I learned this information that now we have this holiday that wasn't there before, yet it was. And but the people around me never celebrated it. So to me this was like very confusing. And then when I go look it up and I see this is back in 1865, now I feel like there's I think the word I used was gaslighting, because now there's going to be this idea, oh, but it was there the whole time, when in reality it wasn't. There was so much loss and suffering that had to happen in order for this holiday to become a reality and for everyone to pay attention to it.
Yeah. Um, the interesting thing is that, who was history written by originally? They say
The,
history was written by the victor. And in this case, the victor who has been, white men who have largely dominated the political sphere and the public sphere of this country for the longest time. And occasionally you'd get those uh, minorities of excellence, women of excellence, um, minorities, African American, Asian American, um, Hispanic American, people, not people of excellence, but who exhibited excellence in a public sphere. Um,
well, I think part of my belief on this is that, you know what, we're going to put you down. It's like there's no support, right? We're going to not see any value in you until you're successful. And then when you're successful, we'll say we supported you, right?
right,
Like,
right.
and
And
I feel like this is some of what's happened here too.
well, exactly, because even though it said in that proclamation that there was an equality of persons, that wasn't actually true. And there was the
Mm-hmm.
whole evolution of history. There was the Black Wall Street, which got completely obliterated by violence of whites against blacks. Again, that I hadn't learned about until recently. I knew of Juneteenth, not as Juneteenth, but I knew of the declaration or the proclamation of the freeing of slaves, but I didn't realize there was a holiday. So, of course, it makes sense that it would be a holiday, especially to those people who were formerly enslaved. why they would celebrate that. And even this morning, I was watching The View before we came on, and Sunny Hostin, who uh, was saying that in their household they did not celebrate the 4th of July because that wasn't their uh, uh, day of freedom. It was Juneteenth,
Mm.
which was kind of interesting that we didn't know this. Now, I happen to work in an area where there were a lot of African American people. I hadn't heard of it. My wife had worked in a primarily African American district, 99% African American district, and she didn't know until about 5 or 6 years ago of Juneteenth. And that was
Right. So
also
it
in Missouri, which
actually,
considered the South. Um,
right. So it was a holiday celebrate. So really, a lot of African American people would celebrate this, but we didn't know. So it didn't become a federal holiday or a recognized holiday until last year, but it was a holiday. Like they celebrated it as a holiday.
Correct. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the interesting thing is that why do we celebrate holidays? Some of them, like Christmas and Easter, those are religious holidays for the country, which is not exclusively but primarily Christian, um, or of Christian descent, I should say, if that makes sense. Um, but then most of our other holidays, like the 4th of July, like Memorial Day, Veterans Day, Labor Day, were all points in history that pointed to something. So Labor Day recognized the labor movement and the purpose of labor in building this country. Memorial Day, obviously, to remember those who died giving their life to protect our freedoms. Veterans Day, that's self-explanatory. And then we have, the before most recent holiday before was Martin Luther King Day, to
Mm-hmm.
celebrate this icon of the civil rights movement and all that he did. And so Juneteenth kind of harkens back to I think the beginning of that. Where
Mm-hmm.
did it really start? And it started with their freedom, the freedom of
Mm.
enslaved Americans. And because I think African Americans make up right now 13% of of the population.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we could say, well, that's a minority. Their history doesn't matter, but it is American history, and I think it's all
Mm-hmm.
part of that. And given I'm going on, you can please stop me at any time.
Well,
Um,
I'm just going to, I want to get out the Adam Grant quote because a lot of the things that you're bringing up is I am and have been and still to some extent am ignorant of. And one of the quotes he talks about, what's more dangerous than ignorance? Being ignorant of your ignorance. So I was totally ignorant of my ignorance when
mhm,
it came to Juneteenth. And for me, it was very confusing, um, because and now in some sense I'm a little angry because I feel like what will happen in the future is there, which may or may not be good for the society, there will be this perception by those now celebrating it that it was always that way,
mm,
which may end up being good as far as like from a perception. Um, because kids that are growing up today, they will only know the world will have only existed with this as we continue to celebrate it. Does that make sense?
yeah, it does. And here is my fear. So before I get into my fear on this, um, taking a step back is, why haven't we celebrated it all along? And for the longest time, the voices that were heard in American society were white male voices. It took
Right.
until the 1920s for the women to get the vote. It took until the passage of the Civil Rights Act for African American women to vote, to
Yeah.
get that kind of voice in the public sphere. And just now, we have gone away from being a white dominated society to a pluralistic society. And I say that insofar as that all of these minority groups were have been separated. You stay in your own little enclave, you do your own little thing, you just kind of submit to the larger cultural norm. And what has happened as we have evolved and we've said no, all of these people have something valuable to say, something valuable to contribute. And the truth of the history includes the truth of these minority groups. So it includes the truth of African American history. It includes the truth of Asian American history. And all that encompasses over time, including the um, the inequality of how we treated everyone.
Well, and how we treat each other. And I think that's what I'm trying to say is I don't want us to forget what it took to hear the voice of the minority.
And here is my fear in that is what's happening now is some of the laws that are being passed to change curriculum and saying this cannot be taught or it must be taught in this way. And I'm like, why don't we teach the truth of what happened? Why do we want to go back where those truths are glossed over
Mm-hmm.
and people are kept in their enclaves? Stonewall is important to remember. If we're talking about the gay rights movement and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
and the trying to dial back on these things that have come up and saying, hey, we've lived in the closet long enough. It's not fair. All we want is equality. We don't
Mm-hmm.
want more rights than anybody else has. We want the same rights. Women want the same rights. African Americans want the same rights. Gay Americans want the same rights. Disabled Americans want the same rights.
Right. But I think there's this underlying um I I don't know what to call it. Not a story, but there's this underlying thing. Like if we think about it, like from the underdog, or let's, you know, that that you're not good enough until you prove yourself good enough. And so now like people like Martin Luther King or like Judy Heumann with the disability rights and the ADA. Oh goodness gracious, who else? Yeah, there are plenty of people out there on all levels, right? um so they've become heroes, and they so we can only celebrate them when they've become a hero, but we're not going to support them. So now we'll support them, but we didn't support them before. And so how do we, and I think that happens in families. I think that happens in corporations, and I think that happens in society at large. Prove to us you can do it, and then we'll give you what you need.
Right. I see that. I mean, look at like Stephen Hawking, but he was the pinnacle of excellence in his field. So of course he was able to get that support that he needed. But what about,
Right.
if we think that everyone is of value, um, and they have we want to give people the freedom to express their value, there has to be that equality of um, opportunity.
Well, so I mean, even when I look at in my small family, we don't have all of the same capacity to do, right? Um, maybe, some of us are book smart, right? Which right now in the world that's very intellectual or logical type of smarts is considered, super important.
Hmm.
Um, Others of us are emotionally and wise or intelligent or willing to go in that place, but we're not the same. Some of us are just very artistic.
Hmm.
So, from my perspective, we're just different. So, what if by getting together with that intellectually smart person, putting together the emotionally intelligent smart person, the intellectually smart person, and the artistic person, I'm just using those three, um,
Hmm.
we can create something beautiful that if we only had emotionally intelligent people or intellectually intelligent people or artists, that we couldn't create without all of them.
Well, I think that's a misunderstanding of what equality is. Because, in that sense, if we all place certain value on the intellectual person is going to be, the, get this grade, and the emotional person is going to get this grade, and the artistic person is going to get this grade. And I mean, when I mean by grade, I don't mean like school grades, I mean like value,
Mm-hmm.
or the white person is going to get this value, and the black person is going to get this value, and the Asian person is going to get this value, and the gay person is going to get this value, and the disabled person is going to get this value, just because they're disabled. It has nothing to do with the inherent gifts that they bring. And it's equality is recognizing that we all have gifts and need to be allowed to express them. I mean, the Declaration of Independence says, to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Though those are the things. What are we happiest at? We're happiest when we're doing things that we love, that we're good at, that we have talents, that we can contribute to society. So if we're having that, it's not an equality of, it's an equality of opportunity, I think.
Yeah, I think
And
I like the way you put that, the inequality of opportunity
yeah,
to give back
yeah. And
to the
so to tie
world.
it back into the Juneteenth, if people are slaves, they had no opportunity to be equal because they were told this is what you do. And that's why that's so important.
Yeah, and I can't help but also think about the messages that were sent to them, the emotionally damaging messages. You're not good enough. You have to be a slave. All of the toxic and abusive things that had been done, and how that also, I believe, gets passed down through generations. And because there's really, I think, a mindset beneath that, we have to be careful, we have to watch out for the law because they're not going to watch out for us. I'm just trying to think of
Hmm.
all the things that might come up from that,
Well,
and
even
living in that state of fear.
yeah, even being ignorant white women, we can relate to being women. Well, women should do this, women shouldn't do that. We need a man to do this. This is
Mm-hmm.
women's roles. The way that we're culturally conditioned, even as women. So we're taking half the population right there. and and I think what's important and why we're tying this into equality, because yes, it's primarily a holiday to celebrate African Americans' freedom from slavery, and I don't want to diminish that, but at the same time, what makes that holiday important is how relatable it is to others who have gone through similar, again, not to the extreme of slavery, but
Right.
to similar experience, whether they whatever wherever they come from.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's how I see it. And here I want to give a call out here at this point is that we welcome comments. We want people to engage in this conversation with us. So,
Mm-hmm.
if you're watching us live, great. If you're watching us on replay, please put your comments in there, because we are ignorant and we don't want to be ignorant of our ignorance. We want to understand these other perspectives. This is just where we're coming from right now.
Well, that, and I also want to point out and admit to, when I am ignorant of my ignorance, sometimes I don't like it being pointed out, um, even though I appreciate it at the end of the day. Like, I really do, because I can go and think about it. But the first time somebody says something, sometimes I'm like, no, like, and I think that happens in society too, which is why I think it took so long to even know that this was a holiday. But now let me say this much: I still want to say I was never told about it. I was
Hmm.
unaware of it. But and I don't, and even right now, I'm just confused because I'm sad. How come it took so long? And and I think that's part of that. Part of, I'm so glad it's there, and at the same time, how come it took so long?
Right.
And you know, and it makes me wonder about all the other things in this life that take so long to finally figure out.
I agree, and I think, I mean, that's one of the good things that has happened. I think since we've been in school, was the rise of the months. So right now we're in Pride Month,
Mm-hmm.
and people are like, why do you need Pride Month? If you ask that question, that's exactly why we need it, because you don't understand the struggle. And the idea is that it's supposed to teach it. I believe you said next month is Disability Pride Month.
Right, it is. Mm-hmm.
And that can help teach people about you know disabilities and how that affects it, but also the contributions of people with disabilities can give to society, not to consider people with disabilities as irrelevant, unimportant, money sucks, if
Yeah.
um, you know, uh, if that's the thing, because again, it all goes back to is that equality of opportunity. How can we
Mm-hmm.
give that opportunity to people with disabilities to come out and be able to make the contributions, to use their talents and their gifts, um,
Right. I mean, I
to
could speak for
contribute.
days on that one,
Oh,
probably.
I know, and I'm sure we'll have that conversation in the future. And I think, I mean, for you, this is a start. What you're doing right here is a
Mm-hmm.
start, using your talents and your gifts to be able to come and give a voice to people who may not have had a voice, and it's beautiful.
Right. Ditto. I mean, I think we're doing it. Hopefully, we're doing this together so that,
Well, we are. We are.
it's.
Because we all are relatively
we are.
damaged.
Well, and I think too, really recognizing that. And I think also it's important, speaking to the mental health of where, and the dynamic of where, like, the African American person came from, and acknowledging that there was some serious pain and suffering, and then knowing that that does get passed down through generations in beliefs and behaviors. I think even, um I was reading, I wish I could remember where, but like, um ma- I believe it was males, but males with fathers who had been in wars uh suffered more and had more mental health issues. So, we're really finding out that it's not just we're not just an individual separate human, that when we're born, things do get passed down, and some of those larger societal or cultural injuries come with us. And I think
Mhm.
that is also really important to talk about, especially for with Juneteenth, that slavery is a tremendously huge injury to people. I mean, they had no freedom except in their minds.
Mm-hmm.
Not unlike um, the Jews in the Nazi camps, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and to some extent, that may have been what it was like to be a slave, and we just don't know or don't have those stories because those people passed on. I mean, I could see that where some really horrible situations could happen because they weren't viewed as even human.
Yes, and here the thing is, I'm you brought that up, and I'm thinking, it made me think of, in spite of all of the iniquity, in spite of the condition, look at the beautiful legacy that we have from African Americans, um, in the realms that they were allowed to participate and contribute. I mean, just look at music. You look at art. You look at I mean, American music. The foundation is Black American music. It
Mm-hmm.
comes from there. And it's just beautiful. I mean, and you look at the individual people that we've had, rise up, um, out of that. And imagine how much more we'd have if everyone had that same opportunity. I mean, you look at, in the Nazi with the Jews, you look at Anne Frank. I mean, look at Viktor Frankl. I mean, what we have from those people and that legacy that we've had, and other
Mm-hmm.
Holocaust survivors, to not only remember what happened, but to give us that understanding of the human experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it just goes so much beyond, uh, mere quantifiable things. It's a gift of the soul.
Yeah. Mm.
And you know just and if people were allowed to give that, and to be fully who they were. I just finished watching the first two seasons of Gentleman Jack. Hopefully, there'll be a third, which is about a woman who was basically a lesbian in 19th century Britain, and how she defied the social norms, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to do what it was that she wanted. And this series was based on her diaries. And it was just, I mean, it's just kind of amazing that these few people rise above that. And it's great that we understand them, that we celebrate them, but also to look at, how extraordinary they were, that they overcame these things. And
Well, and
how many of us could be extraordinary if we had that equality of opportunity
and that support, because
and that support.
I think it takes courage, and I think that I don't know that they felt safe. I mean, I think Viktor Frankl probably felt safe enough to rise up, right? Um, some of these other people, it may have just happened, but I wish for everyone, I think, regardless of ability, race, creed, anything, to feel supported, and that they and safe enough that they can step out of that comfort zone with some courage, because they feel safe enough and supported that they can step up and just really show give us that gift of the soul. I think that's so important. And yeah, it's just so important. Please give us the gift of your soul. That's what we're here for.
Mm-hmm. I just want to say I'm glad that we are now celebrating Juneteenth, because we have a better understanding of American history, and hopefully can make the promise of this country true for all Americans, and all Americans can find their freedom and represent that, and like you say, give you gifts of the soul.
Thanks so much, Kat.
Thank
I
you.
always love these conversations with you.
It's great. It's great.
It is. Okay. There is also a Relatively Damaged podcast, which you can find on Spotify, Apple, and many more, where I talk with some amazing guests about their struggle and how they found hope and healing. And so many of them, I think, found that place in their life where they could be courageous. I'm Angela, and
And
this
I'm
is,
Kat. Kat.
and we'll see you next week.